At the recent Nebraska Power Farming Show at the Lancaster Event Center in Lincoln, we talked with Tina Barrett from Nebraska Farm Business, Inc. about 5 resolutions for 2016. Tina has an article on the Crop Watch website now with the same theme, starting with resolution number 1, know your costs. We started by asking Tina how many producers know their costs of production.
I think it's tough. Anytime we kind of start working with a new producer, I don't know, they might know their costs per acre for seed, fertilizer, chemicals, and maybe crop insurance, but some of those bigger costs, like even depreciation and utilities, and some of those bigger, more rounded costs, that's a tough one that people know. So to really get down to having a true cost of production, I think it's hard for most people to do. And so unless you have, like a pretty good intensive spreadsheet or something, most people don't incorporate all costs.
The second resolution is to control family living, and I'm sure that's one you've been saying for a long time. We certainly have talked about it multiple times here.
Right. I feel a little bit like a broken record because it seems like it's what I talk about every time, but it is really important, and it can be just as important as that fertilizer cost for operations, especially where there's not a lot of non-farm income in. And it's one of those costs that's really hard. In fact, I saw a quote just today that said, family living's like concrete, and once it's set, it's really hard to change, and that's really kind of what it comes down to. And family living went up a lot with profitability, and now it's really hard to make that change.
The third resolution that you set out is to evaluate your debt load. What should we be looking at?
And this is really, really variable based on different producers, because some have relatively low debt load, some have quite a bit. On average, we've seen that debt load climb quite a bit. So there's lots of things. As we hear about interest rates potentially rising, that's going to be an impact for those carrying a lot of debt. As for those that are in a high debt to asset situation where we have a pretty tight margin, it's going to be tough as margins come down, having enough cash to repay that debt, those loans. So lots of things that we need to figure out there, but it really is an individual thing. Some people don't have a problem, and others, we've got a lot of payments to make.
One of the other resolutions was to select your inputs carefully, and how do you do that without maybe sacrificing something in the future if you don't do it this year?
Right, it's a tough thing, and a lot of times, your inputs come down to a loyalty that you've worked with, somebody for such a long time, and you want to buy your inputs from them, and hopefully those suppliers are doing their best job to be competitive for you. But finding a different supplier might be a way to find a cheaper cost without sacrificing production capabilities. At the same time, maybe we need to look at different inputs because we don't have as much profitability there. Maybe those things that get us that last 5 or 6 bushels to the acre might cost $30. Well, we don't get $30 out of 5 bushels of corn anymore. So, we need to make sure that those inputs match up to today's profitability.
And the final resolution is to watch lease agreements. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's no surprise that cash rent's a big deal. And there's going to be lots of adjustments that need to happen. And it's a tough situation because the landlord's costs are increasing at the same time the tenant's profitability is falling. And so there's going to be some tough negotiations. And I think there really isn't anything market value in cash rents that pays right now, but we're not looking at a commodity that's based off of profitability so much as the market value that's out there. And there's so much competition for that land, and people who are willing to burn working capital and burn net worth for the right to have that ground for a while. So it's a tough situation. So. You need to look again at your individual operation, because if you're in a tight debt situation where you don't have much working capital, you can't afford to farm that ground for very long. But if you're in a good debt position and you want to make that choice to farm at a loss to have that ground, it's a decision that you can make. And that also depends on if we're talking about 180 out of 1,000 acres or if we're talking 800 acres out of 1,000 acres that we're going to be losing money on. So it really becomes an individual situation, but regardless, landlords and tenants are going to have to come together on some sort of agreement there.